Hi guys, this is Chris from Soundproofing Expert. In this episode we're going to be learning how to plaster a wall and a ceiling. I've broken down the plastering into 8 easy steps, so if you're a beginner or you've plastered before, check out the video for a perfect plastering finish. I've put links in the description so you can purchase your own tools for the job. Don't forget to hit the like button and to subscribe, and hope you enjoy the video. Before we get started, let's have a look at some of the tools that we're going to need for the job. First of all, we've got the hawk, which is the board that we actually put the plaster onto, and then we can come off here onto the wall. We've got a bucket trowel, which is used to get the plaster out of the bucket. We've got our main plastering trowel, which is 35 centimeters, and this has got a pre-worn feathered edge. This particular brand is Ox, and most of the tools that I use for plastering are Ox tools. I'll put a link in the description so you can buy some of these from Amazon. They're pretty readily available and they're quite a decent price. We've also got a small corner trowel. We're going to need that to get a nice tight corner between the ceiling and the wall. We've got our brush for cleaning stuff. We've got our mixing paddle, which is a cheap option, and this attaches into a drill. We've got one of these garden spray bottles, a small one. I think this is a 2-litre one, and this will be used towards the end of the plastering to wet down the plaster and give it a good polish. We've got an Ox knife, which is used to cut the scrim tape. The scrim tape is a jointing tape, so the plaster doesn't crack where the boards join, so that's what we're going to start off with. Lastly, we've got a brush, which is good for in the corners and just smoothing things off. We'll get to the plaster in a minute. So today we're going to be doing this wall and the ceiling at the same time, which is a little bit more advanced. If you're just starting plastering yourself, probably just try the ceiling first and then do the wall separately, which makes it a lot easier. But the first thing we're going to do is use the scrim tape or joint tape, which is going to go in between the boards where you've got joins. It's going to go in the corners, and then obviously we can get our plaster mix on and show you how we're going to plaster. So here I'm just putting the tape exactly where I need. I'm not going to do the whole room, so just for the purposes of this video, we're just going to scrim the actual areas that we need. It's sticky on one side. There's also different types, there's orange, blue, white. We sort of tend to use the blue, and the orange ones are just a little bit more sticky. And also I find it easier to see where the joins are, and it gives you a bit of a mark to work towards. Well, the other thing to watch for when you're doing your taping is that the heads of the screws are sort of slightly recessed into the board. Obviously any screws that are proud are going to hit on your trowel and they're going to be in the way, so just make sure the screws are slightly, below the surface of the board. Okay, so that's the ceiling and the walls taped up. We're now getting to mix the plaster. We're using Thistle multi-finish plaster. Obviously there's different types you can use for different applications. Because we're using fresh plasterboard that we've recently purchased and applied, we don't need to PVA the wall or do any other preparations. This plaster, the multi-finish, is designed to go on fresh plasterboard. If you're doing walls in your house that are old, then you're going to need to look at a different video, which hopefully we can do at some point. But you'll need to PVA the wall first so it doesn't suck the moisture, the wall doesn't suck the moisture out of the plaster. The other couple of things we've got here are a bucket of clean water, so we can use that to clean the tools off and obviously clean the mixing paddle. And then we've got our plastering bucket. Now, whatever amount of water you've got, you're going to get double the amount of plaster in terms of the finished mix. So if I've got half a bucket of water, if I add, then you're going to have a full bucket of plaster, okay? So what I've actually done with this is marked with a bit of blue tape, it's quite handy, exactly half a bucket. So when I'm filling up with water, if I want a full bucket of plaster, I'll put half a bucket of water in up to this line, and then we're pretty much going to get a full bag of plaster in there. For the wall and ceiling, I'm probably going to mix a bit less than a full bucket, so maybe 3/4 of a bucket of plaster. So I'm going to be a bit under that blue line. So let's get that set up. So I've got my drill here, which is just an Erbauer sort of masonry drill. It's actually an SDS. And on my mixing paddle, I've got an SDS chuck adapter. And this will actually mix the plaster no problem. Let's open up the bag of plaster. Now, one trick that a plasterer actually showed me was using the weight of the bag to open it up. I'll show you what I mean. So at the top of the plaster, you've got this flap. Obviously just pull that up, like so. She gives you a decent place to actually pour the plaster out. So I'm just going to pour the plaster in until it actually heaps above the water, and then we can add some more to get the right consistency. Plaster's just above the surface. We're going to mix that in first of all, and then to get the right consistency, we may keep adding more plaster. So that's still very thin at the moment. Got my bucket trowel at hand as well to just give it a scrape round, and obviously we can test the consistency. You want it sort of a bit buttery. You don't want it too thick, and you don't want it so thin that it's actually going to run off the trowel. It's just getting the right consistency. Let's put some more in. Give that a mix around the edges. It feels like it's starting to get the right consistency. But what tends to happen is it sort of tends to get a bit caught on the edges of the bucket at the top. So use the bucket trowel just to free that off. And then what you're aiming for is 0 lumps in the plaster. Okay, so that's quite a nice consistency. It's not too sloppy, it's not too firm. That's all mixed in now, so no lumps. So what we'll do is, using the bucket of water we've got, we'll just clean this off, because you don't want to leave plaster on your tools, because it's just going to go off and it'll set like rock. And then we just use this brush just to clean off any excess plaster. So with this room, we're actually going to plaster this back wall and the ceiling at the same time. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, if you're new to plastering, I would just try one wall and then, or try the ceiling. It's going to be slightly different feel on the wall as it is to the ceiling. The main things you got to watch are dropping the plaster. Obviously, make sure you don't get it in your eye. Just having the right consistency, and it's actually getting it off the hawk is going to be the hardest thing. So what tends to happen is you use your bucket trowel to load plaster onto the hawk, and then what you're going to do is, actually, if you get used to flicking the hawk and then taking some plaster, obviously keep this fairly horizontal like that, rather than what people try and do is go like this and they end up dropping the plaster in between. So it's get the plaster on your hawk, put your trowel up to it, move your hawk, take a bit of plaster, and then move that away. Obviously, it just takes a little bit of time. If you can get it on the wall, it's very easy to get a good finished plastered wall if you follow the steps that I'm going to go through. Stage 1 is going to be getting the first coat on, which is going to be about 2 mil of plaster. So we get 2 mil of plaster on the wall. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on this side of the wall, and I'm going to plaster like this. So probably going to start around, I'd say just under halfway, so about here, and I'll actually plaster to here. So essentially my first sort of stroke is going to be here with a bit of an arch at the end, and then my next one is doing the same thing, and it's going to overlap. So each time you're just going to overlap. So that'll be the first thing to try. So get this mid-section of the wall on using this technique. So I'll just show you that again. So I'm going to have the plaster on the hawk, take it off, and I'm going to apply it to here. And at the end, I'm just going to, and I'm probably you know, about 1 centimetre off the wall with the trowel, the back of the trowel. I'm not pressing on too hard. If you go too tight and you go like this, you'll end up getting suction and the trowel will get stuck. So just getting used to applying that plaster using this system. So it's on the wall, about 1 centimetre off, and just firm pressure but not too hard. Then we move along and literally we'll just move down the whole wall. So let's see if we can do that to start with. Just before we start actually loading up the hawk, one thing to do is to prime the board. So what I normally do is put a little bit of plaster on, actually just move it around. This is actually a brand new board, so I've never actually used this before. So we just get a bit of plaster on there and it means it's not going to slop off. Okay, so I'll get 1 dollop of plaster, okay, on my hawk. And so I've got that there. I'm literally going to do that. So that gives me my plaster, you can see there, like so. And it's just like practicing picking it up, like that. And then obviously putting it on the wall. So I get my first one on. Okay. And then I'm going to overlap the next one. Okay, so each time I'm just overlapping and just sort of smoothing off a little bit as I go. This time I'm going to get a couple more scoops. So maybe get 2 scoops of plaster if you're feeling confident. It just means you don't have to keep going back. So again, I'm just going like this, just staggering. If you come across, like there, I've just come across a bit of grit. Obviously you want to kind of get, and that's kind of good that you've seen that. I've just got a bit of grit there, so just get that out because that's going to be problematic. But that's kind of a good reason to go over it a couple of times. So each one, I'm just going over, taking my time. The main thing is not to panic. Okay, get two scoops of plaster. Again, just picking that starting point. Actually going up, I got a little bit of a scrape there, so you can see just a little bit of grit. Sometimes that's just from bits that you pick up, or sometimes you get plaster in the bucket that's not mixed in properly. Obviously where you've got the jointing tape, you're probably going to get a tiny bit more plaster in there, so that might sort of suck up a little bit more. So just taking my time there. What I'm trying to do is actually keep this line straight-ish, but it is going off a little bit. But if you kind of start at the same point every time, that's kind of useful. And it's just being methodical about how you actually apply the plaster and how you get it on the wall. So you're just aiming to cover every bit of the wall with a 2mm skim. Okay, it's getting towards the end of that wall. Obviously I'm just going to keep the trowel straight, so straight up, like so. Okay. So what I'll do now is actually, my next place I'm going to go is down at the bottom. So I'm probably going to put some plaster here first, and then I'll start overlapping this at the bottom. So we'll get the bottom section done. I'll just fill this in here. It's kind of where we started. Okay, so let's come from the bottom now. I'm not going to go right to the bottom, as we can come back to that in a second. I'm just going sort of fairly near the bottom. This is going to have a false floor in it anyway, but normally you'll find that the rooms you're plastering, you're going to have skirting boards. So as long as it's flat and it's not going to interfere with the board, you don't have to go all the way to the bottom. But but obviously we can do that. Getting close to the wire there, which is one of the things that is difficult when you're plastering to start with, actually navigating that wire and obviously making sure you can get around it. Can we actually see that? Just come down a bit. Okay, so this wire here is going to be a bit tricky because obviously you can't get your trowel in completely, so we've just got to work around that a little bit. Obviously I'm going to have to come back the other way now to get some plaster towards this edge. So what I'm going to do with this is actually pick the plaster up on the back edge of the trowel. So it's going to be like this. You can just see that there. And that'll allow me to come into the corner and then across. So again, I'm just actually flicking the hawk rather, and then I can actually just clean that off. Don't worry if you drop any on the floor, it's basically going to happen. Okay, so down at the bottom here, hopefully you can see that. Just getting the plaster on the back of the trowel. Just move this out of the way. And then we want to get plaster up to the wire. And then sort of back down. And we just sort of play around with that. Okay, good. Come from this corner, I'll probably come down from the top. So let's just have a look at that. So again, just put this on the back edge of the trowel. So for the top, again, just on the back edge, just pressing in the top and then down. And then with the corner, just get the trowel in like this. Okay, and so the main aim at this stage, when you first start plastering, is literally just to get it on the wall. Don't worry too much about what it looks like, because the stages that we go through to get the plaster nice and flat will actually give you a nice finish. So don't worry about looking at it and thinking, well, it's not very smooth. This is kind of what my plastering looks like at this stage. Okay, so I literally just want to fill in all the gaps essentially. And by overlapping it, it means you've got no thin spots. Okay, just give this a bit of a clean up. Okay, so before I get onto the ceiling, I've still got half a bucket of plaster left. Before I move away from this, I'm just going to give it a quick flatten off. So what that means is, if I'm doing the ceiling now, if you're first starting plastering, you'd probably just start with this one wall. But because I'm doing the ceiling as well, if you have to do that for any reason, it's worth just getting this a little bit flatter at this stage before you move on. So you don't have to worry about it going off and, you know, not looking too good. So I'm literally just going to be a little bit of a flatten off. So again, I'll start on this left hand side. I'm just looking for any spots that are a little bit thin. Essentially, what I found to work well is if you look after the corners and the top and the bottom, like what happens in the middle is kind of a little bit easier to manipulate later on. So just making sure, I suppose that's because that's where generally where it's a little good go on a little bit thinner. So I'm just going over, looking for any problems, just making sure I've got the plaster nice and smooth, or you know, there's no kind of obvious spots where there isn't any plaster. You don't have to get it perfect at this stage. One thing that can happen as well is in the corners, because you've got plaster that's dried a little bit, you can get sort of drags, stone drags coming across, just as I said that. So that's one thing to watch out for, like here. So it's just where you've got a bit of a build-up of plaster, you can normally just trowel those out pretty easily. So with the bottom, I would recommend not coming up too high with this, because you can end up dragging a lot of the plaster that's on the edge of the board up, which kind of causes problems. So I'm literally just coming up, say 4 inches. So what I'll do now is, so I've gone around the perimeter, the bottom. What I can do now is just sort of give it a quick trowel to the middle. Again, just overlapping. I find this sort of method tends to work. Just get the corners sorted and the perimeter, and then what happens in the middle is a little bit easier. You don't have to deal with the corners. Okay, come back the other way. Okay, I'm mindful of the fact as well, I've got a bucket of plaster, which is obviously going off. So I'm trying to do this fairly quickly, but also give you an idea of how this goes down. Okay, so just look for any obvious bits. Okay, so at this stage, that's sort of flattened a bit. You've obviously got quite a lot of ridges, but we're gonna come back to that in a few minutes. What we're gonna do now is get the ceiling on. So one thing to note with this, obviously, you're gonna be keeping the trowel more horizontal. You just gotta be careful it doesn't fall in your eyes. So essentially, I'm gonna start in this corner and sort of come against this wall. So I'm gonna be going like this. So that's the ceiling on. Again, I'm just gonna clean all my tools off. If you're looking at that, you can see a lot of ridges. That's fine at this stage. What I will do, and what's kind of I find useful in the ceiling, because what happens at the edges, it tends to go off a little bit quicker here. And obviously once I trowel this, it's gonna scrape a little bit. So what I do, it's a little bit maybe controversial, is just to use a 2-inch brush with a bit of water on it. Just before I trowel this off, just get some water on the brush. And literally I'm just gonna go in that corner and just flatten that off a little bit. Okay, a bit more water. It just helps get a slightly better finish at this stage, and then I'm not dragging plaster that's dried. I'm not dragging it into the middle of the room. So we'll start where we started actually applying the plaster, which is on this other wall. So I'm just going to flatten this off a little bit.
Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise.
just going to clean the bucket out whilst that's going off a little bit. So I'm going to see you guys for a minute and then we'll be back. So I've just left that for 10-15 minutes whilst I was cleaning the bucket. Just before we mix the second coat, there's still a couple of little ridges here and there. So what I tend to do at this stage is just nip round quickly with the brush on the edges, as I did before, and then just flatten off any particular spots where you've got ridges, just so that when the second coat goes on, it's nice and flat. So I'll do that now quickly, then we'll get the second mix on. Okay, so that's the first coat on, that's all flattened off, we've given it enough time. We've got a second mix ready to go on. This one's going to go on slightly thinner, or it's supposed to be slightly thinner than the first coat. I tend to keep it similar. This is all looking quite nice and flat. If I can just show you around, you can pretty much see. So ceiling's nice and flat and this wall. So what I'm going to do is actually going to start at this end. I'm going to, in a similar way, I'm going to start over here in this midpoint, because it's kind of like an easy place to start when you first do plastering. So start here, get this section, do the bottom, top, and then I'll start moving this way to the end. And I'm just going to go pretty quickly on this one. So not much explanation, just going to fly through it. Okay, so see you on the other side. Okay, so that's the second coat on. Just going to wash the tools off, then I'll show you around to show you what that looks like at the moment. Okay, so let's just see if we can have a quick look around. Get it right up to the ceiling. Obviously, we know the first coat was nice and flat. This one I've just thrown on, really. It kind of looks pretty awful. And obviously if you're a pro plasterer watching this, you'll do a far better job. But for beginners, where you've got sort of ridges, what the key thing is that I've actually overlapped everything. So the second coat is completely covering the first coat. So you can see up there, probably on the ceiling. So what I tend to do now is one quick brush around again with my brush just around the corners, and then obviously we'll go around and sort of not pressing in too much. We'll get the walls flattened off a little bit. Then we can go and wash the bucket, which obviously is down here, whilst that's drying, and obviously we'll get to the next stages. So let's get the brush on it and then we'll get to the next stage. So that's gone round with the brush. I'm just going to go around with the trowel now. I'm pretty much going to do all the corners. We'll start with the wall, get these sides done, this bit here, and then the in-between bit, main body of the wall, and then we'll do the same on the ceiling. Nice clean trowel.
From the dead is a miracle, doc. They counted me out. Moment of truth, counting it down. Underdog story was down for the count. Back on my feet, back with a mic, back on the beat, back with a family that bang in the streets. The game on lock, I stand with a key. Standing my ground, I am planning to flee. Standing my ground, I am planting my feet. Taking a stand, embracing my destiny, shaking his hand. Flipping the script, changing the plans. Up to the top and I'm taking the fans. Making them jump, making them dance. Making them jump, making them dance. We about to change the game. We out here taking names. Let our voices rise. Let them reach the skies. We about to change the game. We out here taking names. Let our voices rise. Let them reach the skies. Hickory dock, giving them all that we got. Kick on the door, try to knock, but nobody answered. I'm going hard to take your
That's that's the second coat on, and I've just given it a bit of a flatten off, so you can hopefully get to see that. So what I'm going to do now is going to give that probably around 15 minutes just to tack off, go a bit drier, and then we'll start going through the process of flattening it again and polishing it. So I'll see you guys in a minute. What I'm actually going to do is just in these corners, find it quite useful using this little tool, as you can see it, just to kind of square off those corners. In each direction. Yeah. Gives you a nice, neat finish without disrupting the plaster too much. Okay. Let's do these other sides whilst I'm at it. So I'm not going too heavy on this, just trying to get a consistent, smooth wall. Just taking the ridges out of the plaster. Really, I want to end up with no lines at all at the end of this. We're going to leave that now for 10 minutes or so, maybe 10-15 minutes, see how that goes. In the meantime, I'm going to tidy up, always something to do when you're plastering. I'll switch the camera off, see you guys in 10 minutes. Okay guys, we're just about to do the first trowel down with some water. We're going to go through this twice. This is the first time we're going to use this. This is like a garden hose sprayer. So obviously you put your water in, pump it up, and then give you a nice bit of water. So we're just generally going to apply water to the wall, and then just sort of try and get it nice and even and polish it up a bit. So this is an essential part of the method. So let's get on with it. Okay, that's taking shape. So that's the first trowel with some water. With this one we did the wall and the ceiling, so obviously to try and get a nice finish here, what we want to do is, well, we can use a brush, which we have done, but we've also got the corner trowel, which is, they do some bigger ones and I never find they get a good finish with, so I don't know whether this is actually for this, but it seems to work pretty well. So put in the comments if I'm doing that wrong or if you've got any better ways. But what I'm going to do is carefully, I'm going to just apply a bit of water and then run this along, just keeping it slightly off the wall so we're not getting any drag marks. So I'll just chuck a bit of water along. What it will do is leave a tiny bit of a line. So I might need to sort of flatten it off with the other trowel as well, but hopefully this should give me a really good finish. I'm not going to put too much pressure on either. That's pretty good. Okay, so just taking a little bit of the plaster off, which is kind of what we want, because it's giving us a nice square edge. Let's go from the other side. Yeah, that's great. So again, it's just taking a little bit of excess plaster off. Okay, we're going to whiz through this again. We're going to do another wet trowel, take off a little bit more of the plaster. It's onto the stage where it's a little bit drier now, so The water's going to pull it back a bit. We're going to be able to refine it a little bit more. After this, we can sort of start packing away, and then we'll do a final dry trowel. I'll show you that and how to get a good finish. But yeah, it's starting to look really good. The corners are all nice and tight, nice and neat. That little tool that I was just talking about, obviously these are all in the description. This thing, absolutely amazing. I've never actually used one. I've always had the big one, big corner trowel, which tends to sort of leave quite a few marks I can't tend to get rid of, or don't seem to be able to get rid of. So yeah, check that out. For a beginner, that or even a professional, that is a great little tool.
Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise. Let your spirit rise. We've come to.
So that's the final trowel with water. I'm just going to leave that now for a few minutes. In the meantime, it's ideal to tidy up. So just going to have a bit of a tidy round so I can get away. This is me done for today. So I'll let that dry a little bit. Give it one final trowel. I'll show you how that's done, and then that'll be it. Okay, it's time for the final trowel. We've given that plenty of time to go off. What we tend to do, or what I tend to do, I think most plasterers do this, is have a brush. So I've got this big old brush here, and what we tend to do is obviously got a bucket of water as well, and obviously dry trowel this, and then every so often I'll literally just wipe any excess off, so it doesn't kind of cause any rippling effects on the plaster. So let's give that a go. It's starting to go a little bit dark now, even though it's only about 4 o'clock, but let's have a bit of a trial down now with the wall and then the ceiling, and then hopefully we can show you the result. So as I'm going across the wall there, I'm just picking up, you can see that, I can see that on the camera. Yeah, just picking up some plaster. So literally, we just wipe that on my brush, and then eventually you'll get a load on your brush, you can wipe that. But yeah, that kind of works pretty well. Okay, that's me done. Let's just have a little look around and see what it looks like. Hope you found the video useful on plastering. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.